Hello, National Retail Federation. I'm Lindsay Mazza, and I lead our global consumer products and retail domains at Capgemini. Capgemini is a leading global services and consultancy provider. I'm joined today by John Waymeyer, who is an executive vice president and industry leader, also with Capgemini, as well as Randy Evans, who is a global grocery industry expert at SAP, a global enterprise software and services provider leading core digital transformation experiences. And we're here to share with our friends at National Retail Federation the rise of omni-channel in grocery. And we've really seen 2020 as a catapulting experience. We've had consumer safety concerns for shopping within stores as a result of the coronavirus and the pandemic of 2020. And that's increased the need for pickup and delivery services within the grocery industry. But we've also, as a grocery industry, seen this as a major opportunity for continued growth down a path that we would have already explored. So, we really look at the exponential catapulting experience of 2020 as being something that was an opportunity in our industry, really resulting from the idea that consumers were leading us in a path of being willing to purchase things online and either pick them up or have them delivered to their home. That exponential change has really happened as a result of the fact that consumers' needs have shifted. We've gone from the early 2000s in predictable delivery to 2010s with click and collect to subscription services and potential two-day delivery in the mid-2010s, 2015 timeframe. In 2019, we really started seeing same-day delivery, and 2020 yielded for us at the beginning curbside pickup. And today, in 2021, we're seeing 1-hour delivery windows, 2-hour delivery windows, and the expectation that 63% of consumers will order groceries for delivery once per week or more. That is a major change from the drastic early 2000s to 2019 timeframe of potentially getting to, in the high 40% of consumers. That additional 23% of consumers really jumping on this idea of getting consumers at home has created a new experience in the grocery industry. And John Waymeyer and Randy Evans today are going to explain that phenomenon to us, how not only was it coming over time, but that we were catapulted in 2020 by this pandemic. John, may I ask you to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Lindsay. Hi, everyone. As Lindsay mentioned, I'm the global domain lead for Capgemini's SAP solutions in retail and consumer products. I've been with Capgemini for 25 years, and worked all around the world helping our customers solve specific industry challenges using SAP technology. And I'm really excited to be here with you and with Randy to talk about how things are changing fast in grocery. Randy?
Yeah, Randy Evans, industry advisor for SAP's industry advisory practice. I focus exclusively on the food selling business, so grocery, drugstore, and convenience stores. Been with SAP for 13 years. Before that, I worked for HEB in South Texas, American Stores, which was the parent of Jewel in Chicago, Acme, Philadelphia, and the former Lucky Stores in California. Of those 30 years in the business, I spent 25 of them in the perishable side, specifically in the meat business.
Randy, what would you say is the most significant fact relative to the impact of the pandemic on the retail food industry? I mean, I'm leaning into your perishables experience here, understanding that part of the challenge for consumers to be willing to buy online was perishable, and additionally, part of the challenge for retailers to be able to sell BIPOC and click and collect and delivery was in the perishable departments, being able to keep food and frozen and refrigerated and dry goods all separate. So can you talk a little bit about that, the facts of what the pandemic did to grocery?
Well, first thing I'll say, there was two significant events. The pandemic caused unbelievable volume as the food service industry kind of shut down. And everybody that, if you wanted to eat food, you had to go to a grocer. Kind of flipped us back into the 1920s, where the only source for food was your grocery store. The second thing was the percentage of shoppers that went to digital, and by digital I mean they're using a device and ordering, whether it's buy online, pick up in store, or it's home delivery, or even in-store content went off the charts. I mean, the grocery industry was slow walking it, kind of not adopting, but the consumer basically said, we don't really care if I want to adopt it or not, we're shopping digitally. We're not coming into your store. We're afraid. We think we're going to, there's a risk, a health risk, and we're willing to adopt digital. And perishables is a great place because you're right. Most consumers, if you ask them, they would say, I'll shop your store. I'll buy the Cheerios and I'll buy the bags of sugar or whatever, but I'm not buying meat and I'm not buying produce and I'm not buying bakery and deli. I want to see that stuff and touch it. But the pandemic, it all went out the window. All those breaks, all those worries left, and they adopted digital in a big way.
I think you're absolutely right about that. I know that's true for my family as well, Randy. John, what do you think? We talked a little bit about that hockey stick curve that kind of brought us to this exponential growth, but why do you think the grocery industry was originally slow on digital adoption?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. One is complexity. So you talked about the added complexity of perishables. And when you have an order that you're fulfilling, some of it has to be kept cool, some of it has to be kept frozen, some of it can be on a shelf. So there's a complexity to the order cycle that didn't exist for others. And the grocery business itself just being complex. When you shop for groceries, it's a high volume. You're picking out a lot of different items, and they have a lot of different choices. So it's not like people didn't try. One of the things when the internet first went e-commerce, Webvan, Home Shopper, they were technology companies that thought they could do it. And they had good technology, they had good funding, but ultimately they didn't succeed. And if you look at the companies that did succeed, the Ocados, the Peapods, Instacarts, they took technology but grabbed industry partners, because grocery is a complex industry and it takes more than good technology to provide a great grocery experience. And finally, it took something to motivate the customer so that, shopping for groceries and knowing that, I'm pretty good. I can look at a butcher's counter and I think I know the steak I like, what it looks like before it's cooked. And I want that personal control. But changes came and my priorities shifted. And once I experienced that, hey, that shopper's pretty good at picking out my steak too, and I get it at home, it's when I could go back to the store, I'm not sure I'm going because the convenience is there.
That convenience is key. And, we initiated this with safety, and then we became convenience driven. And now I think that there's a sustainability component of it. John, can you talk a little bit about if it's still the case today that we're going to be slow on digital adoption, and if sustainability, convenience, and safety are parts of it?
Well, I think it's definitely going to stay. And, the figures I saw that were the progression of digital adoption in grocery after 3 months of COVID was reaching levels that, some grocery retailers had predicted might take years, up to 10 years to achieve. So that has just happened, and all that experience is there. And the experience, I think, even if you look at what you can expect from March of this year to what you expect, or last year to January of this year, has changed dramatically. You mentioned that before I was probably going to order and go to the store and pick it up, or I was going to have to plan ahead and get a delivery the next day or two. But now it can cater to that total convenience of, I don't even have to plan ahead. If I'm thinking at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and I want something to be ready for dinner tonight, I can make that call. So I think that's really going to drive the stickiness of this digital grocery experience.
Randy, what can grocers do to ensure that they get what they need in order to embrace that digital shopper? Like, today and a few years into the future. We have this whole new consumer set that's out there ready to keep going. They probably accepted some things that were less than ideal during the 2020 pandemic, but as we progress in 2021, they have new and improved expectations. What can grocers do about that?
Well, we think there's 5 elements or pillars, if you will, to an exceptional digital shopping experience. And that, that's a lot of content. So the first thing you have to be able to do is have some patience and put yourself on a roadmap and understand that you're not going to light switch this thing. If you're not doing digital today, or you're very rudimentary, it's going to take you some practice and some time and some investment to be able to pull it off. Those 5 pillars, they're equally important, but they're also they're related to each other. In some cases, they're sequenced. They have to be sequenced. The first one is foundational. You have to have great foundational data. And I'll say the key element in that content is the balance on hand. How much product do you have in your supply chain? And how can you, using predictive technologies, understand how much you need to have in your supply chain? And by supply chain, I mean wherever you're gonna get an order out of, that's your supply chain. Store, micro fulfillment, distribution center, wherever you're going to get inventory, even your suppliers. The second one is marketing. You have to be able to talk to your customer. You have to understand who they are, what they want, and you have to be able to predict what they want as well. The third is commerce. You have to be able to transact an order efficiently and effectively. You have to have a commerce relationship with your shopper. The fourth is fulfillment. And again, if I have to rank them, fulfillment would be one that's an important, because fulfillment is where you take care of that order, where you select it, you prep it, you deliver it either to just a pickup point, like for buy online, pickup in store, or you deliver it to a place where your transportation process can take it and deliver it to a customer. Of those 5 elements, you have to be able to look at them and find out which one you have to do, right? Like, for example, if you don't have a commerce relationship with your customer, you can't transact an order, you're not in the digital business. You're not in the digital business. You have to have an order, but you got to be able to select it. And whether that's with a third party, like you hear Ocado at Sobeys and Kroger, where they're using a third party solution to do that distinctly online transaction, whether it doesn't matter, or in store. A lot of smaller companies are looking at their store personnel and their store inventories as the source for fulfillment. But in that context, you got to be able to understand how to do that efficiently and effectively. One of the things that we're seeing, or that we have seen, is the margin on a digital order is smaller, or in some cases non-existent, because it takes so much effort and time and resource to select that order in that fulfillment process. And so you've got to be able to be really good at fulfillment so that you can turn that digital order into one that has as much profit as an in-store shopper does. So again, there's 5 of them. You don't have to do them all at the same time. In fact, you can't do them all at the same time. You have to be able to sequence them properly. And the last thing I'll say is that first one is the hardest. Having good master data, having good balance on hand information, that's not stuff grocers have been doing very well for the last 50 years. They kind of let the store be invisible. That's no longer an option. You have to know what your inventory is. And as this thing is kind of escalated, grocers have found out that their out of stocks are unbelievably. There's too many. There are way too many, and they didn't even know it because they didn't know what their inventories were. Now the customer is saying, "Here's my order." You go to the slot, to the store slot, if you will, the shelf edge, and there's a lot more out of stocks than what they were anticipating. There's a lot of opportunity in all of those business processes to find value and increase your customer satisfaction.
Randy, I think you hit the nail on the head. We have to get to a place where digital consumers are able to provide the margin that's comparable to, or ahead of what a store consumer would look like, especially in the grocery industry where margins are so small to begin with. And I think that the inventory position helps you there. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I was just going to say, if you're making $4 on an order and it costs you $6 to select it, that's not a very good. That's an easy math problem to comprehend, but it's not an easy one to solve. As far as inventory goes, it's a business process, right? And I work for a technology company, so I have to talk about process at some point in time, especially I work for SAP, and we spend a lot of our time talking about process improvement. But it really is all about process. What are you doing in your store or wherever your inventory is to ensure that you understand what it is? You can get yourself wrapped around the axle and go too hard at it, like putting in massive, perpetual inventory counts and doing wave work. By wave, I mean multiple iterations. And you're not really going to gain the benefit that you're looking for. You have to be able to say, I want a reasonably accurate inventory. I want to be able to know what I have. It's good enough to where I can actually use it, publish it, let my customers see it, so that I can become better at fulfilling their order, and be ready to interact with your shopper, because as that selection process takes place, that's one of the things that Instacart does really well. Is their shoppers, their selectors can actually send a note to their customer. We've partnered with a couple of companies, one we call Shopper Kit, that has the same type of functionality where that selector can see, hey, I'm going to have a short here. Can I communicate with my customer and say, hey, you asked for 16-ounce Cheerios, but all they have is 12-ounce, and you put policies in place that say we're going to give you the cheaper price, no matter what it is. But the point is, you're building a business muscle. You're flexing that muscle. You're understanding how to do it, and doing it in a way that is going to bring your customer closer to you, and they're going to feel like, hey, these folks they're selecting my groceries. It's not just an order; it's my order, and you develop that relationship, and you become their choice for food, because it's like I said at the beginning, the grocery industry has taken a prominent position as the provider of food for the world.
Randy, I love that you hit on business process improvement combined with the technology. I think we know the technology exists. It's out there. It's ready and available to be implemented now. It's the business processes that we need to do in order to catch up with it. And you talked about fulfillment as one of those 5 pillars, and that seems pretty important. A lot of grocers that we're speaking with are talking about micro fulfillment and backroom automation and in-store picking and things like that in order to support the new brand ethos that consumers expect, which is things are hyper local. They come to me from my local environment. They're sustainable in that the shipping costs aren't high. And I think that brings that margin component, it really improving our last mile delivery around that fulfillment pillar, and lowering the last mile costs are going to allow for that margin. So can you talk a little bit about your mentioning of the fulfillment pillar?
Right. So it's the place where you take costs out, quite frankly. The ability to optimize the selection routine, the ability to automate it if possible. Micro fulfillment is kind of a hot button today, but essentially what we're saying is we want to be able to select that order with the least amount of cost possible. And that ultimately leads to automation and robotics, machine learning and AI. We wouldn't have even thought about this 10 years ago, because the technology couldn't support it. Today, in my world at SAP, that's what we do for a living. We provide the technology to facilitate being better at and more efficient at whatever the process is. And in this case, fulfillment, it really is the place where you can bring that margin from nothing or very minimal to equal to what you would have made if they were an in-store shopper.
Yeah. Well, thank you for walking through that. I think that it certainly is a great exploration of those pillars. John, how are SAP and Capgemini working together? We know the technology is there, but we want to enable this end-to-end digital shopper. So how are Capgemini and SAP working together in order to do that?
Well, Lindsay, Capgemini and SAP have both embraced the concept of a digital core with cloud native extensions to solve the specific problems that we've talked about over this session, and apply things like Randy just mentioned. The technology's there to use AI to increase efficiency of in-store picking, for instance. So we're definitely taking that alignment about the SAP digital core plus that SAP industry cloud view, where specifically for grocery, there are applications created by SAP or Capgemini or even third parties that can integrate together to provide the value specific to address grocers problems, whether it's in-store picking, Randy talked about, shopper kit, whether it's maybe you're ready to have that highly automated owned space, either as a dark store or something near your store, where a company like Fabric has designed a robotic system of the robots and the storage specifically to address grocers. Or if it's the economics of last mile, maybe in the architecture, there's a third party like OneRail, which can take your own transportation and also accommodate third parties or even, gig delivery services into giving you that capability to make those 2-hour delivery windows you talked about. So the partnership is SAP and Capgemini coming together, knowing that to make a strong SAP digital core effective for grocers, you have to have that ecosystem of the things that wrap around the core that use AI and automation. And together we've created and we're going to curate an architecture that includes those elements that can bring a version of that architecture that is relevant to where that grocer is on their digital journey to the problem. So it's really about leveraging the SAP technology there that be the core, or things that are around SAP that are cloud specific elements that are going to grocers' problems and helping them with that next step of the digital journey. They made I have to maintain that market share step in 2020, and now it's about getting growth through a better customer experience and better services and really improving profitability in that growth.
John, I like that you're touching on how do you actually get close to the consumer. It's the technology is there, the architecture can be applied, and let's get close to the shopper so that we can learn more about them using AI, using cognitive and more. I guess specific to fulfillment, what would the roles of SAP and Capgemini look like?
Well, clearly SAP provides a core and a solid foundation of technology that's proven to work for the grocery industry. But equally, with the concept of the SAP industry cloud, there's acknowledgement that you need to have some industry specific elements or things that are unique to you that have to be integrated. And that's Capgemini's role, to look at from a grocery knowledgeable point of view, how do you bring those additional elements that wrap around the core and integrate them so that each grocer doesn't have to go through that journey alone or for the first time, that you can get that industry reuse and experience of saying, these are not just the best practice processes that are inside a core of SAP technology, but truly a more end-to-end process that uses that core, but enhances and extends it with a very focused industry-specific solution element, and that the integration on how that works is already mapped out and can be brought to you more as a seamless product. And that's how we're working together.